Good
This
afternoon,
conference will now
everybody.
be recorded.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Bienvenidos, buenas tardes to the annual Caribbean Community Meeting. We're really excited to have you here. Uh, if you're not familiar, like many of us are still learning about Google Meets, we want to, before starting, to give you a quick overview. Uh, while the presentations are running, we want you to keep your microphone and video off. It's good to see you all right now, but when the presentation starts, please turn them off. You can add questions and comments into the chat. You can also raise your hand for questions, but please, we kindly ask you to wait until the presentations are completed, and we will try to give everybody an opportunity to talk, but will depend on the time. And we are here to celebrate our community successes. So please feel free to use the quick reactions to support the accomplishments of the presenters. So now that we're starting, my name is Yaritza Rivera. I'm the chair of the NOAA and the Caribbean Community Group. I am also the NOAA Marine Debris Program Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean. And again, I'm going to introduce the team later, but I want to share the objectives for this meeting. We shall provide opportunities for information sharing and networking. We have a lot of great sessions for that. Strengthen collaborations within the Caribbean community. Support the next generation of professionals. We have an activity specific for that today. And reflect on the history and the impacts of NOAA in the Caribbean. We have a great panel today for you to understand more the role of NOAA in the Caribbean and to see the history of it. The agenda for the whole week will be we're going to have a plenary and history of the contributions of NOAA in the Caribbean today, and it's going to be followed by a speed networking with the next generation of professionals, and it includes many NOAA staff that are going to be guiding this new generation. This one was only by reservation, so yeah, today most of you will only hear about the history in the Caribbean. Tomorrow we have two kind of unique sessions because besides just giving the presentations, we're going to have the opportunity for networking after the presentations. And it's going to be different topics on habitat restorations and corals of our grantees from 2023 to 2024. On Wednesday, we're going to have three sets, including community focused projects, pollution panel, and data tools panel as well from our grantees from 2022 through 2024. We're going to close it with the NOAA resources for the community, and this one was also by registration. I'm going to introduce you to Catherine. She's the CCART coordinator, regional coordinator, to give us an overview of what is CCART since NOAA in the Caribbean Community Group fits under CCART.
Thanks, Yaritza. Hi, everybody. Like Yaritza said, I'm Catherine Egan. I'm the Southeast and Caribbean Regional Coordinator for NOAA. I help lead a team called the Southeast and Caribbean Regional Collaboration Team, also known as CCART. You can go to the next slide, Yaritza. Oh, next slide.
Can you
There
see
you
it?
go. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I think it's just a little slow. So yeah, this is one of 8 teams as part of NOAA's regional collaboration network. Basically, we're focused on facilitating collaborations across the agency to improve the services that we provide to partners, communities, the public. Our team is made up of 17 NOAA representatives that represent NOAA's assets in the Southeast and Caribbean, and we're also happy to have 4 core NOAA partners on our team as well. Again, making up the rest of NOAA's capabilities within the region. So we do a lot of internal outreach within NOAA, and we also do a lot of external outreach as well to listen to problems that are going on, in the region that may require that cross NOAA collaboration aspect. And like Yaritza said, NOAA in the Caribbean is a part of this. We kind of treat it like a mini regional collaboration team that exists within CCART. So we're really looking forward to hearing what's going on within our community group over the next couple of days. And I in particular am looking to see what kind of topics or issues may bubble up that requires that cross-line office collaboration, or something we could do to help improve the services we provide to the community within the Caribbean. So yeah, I think that's it. I'll be here for the duration of the meeting, and I'm really looking forward to learning from all of you this week. So thank you. Back to you, Yuritsa.
Thanks, Catherine. I want to introduce you to the executive team of NOAA in the Caribbean. I am the chair. We have Eliza Thomas here. She's a Canals Fellow and she's the Executive Secretariat, and she's going to be the facilitator through the week. We have Alisa Aranzazu, Jay, Catherine, Sammy, Trika, and Zoraida. We recently, Lucy, she is going to be here in one of your panels. She retired from NOAA, but you're going to learn about her. So we're really thankful for her work here for NOAA in the Caribbean. Uh, the team, we're all from different line offices, so we kind of represent different parts of NOAA. But I also want to introduce you to our planning team. Kudos to these people that make this possible. It was like a total team effort. As you see, some of the executive team is here, but we also have some other uh, staff from NOAA that participated in this, like Alisa, Anastasu, Eliza, and Catherine, and myself, and Zoraida. We're all from the executive team, but I want to highlight Ernesto Rodriguez from the Weather Service here in Puerto Rico, Helena Antoine from Fisheries, and Kemit. Kemit is not with us today because he's doing really exciting stuff today. We can talk about that later, but thank you. Thanks a lot for all your work that you put into this meeting. And with the agenda for today, I'm gonna pass it to Eliza, who, as I mentioned, she's gonna be the one that is gonna be facilitating through the week as our executive secretariat.
Awesome. Can you all hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So, Yaritza, I think I'll need you to stop sharing yours and then I'll be able to do mine. Great. Thank you so much. Great. Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is so great to see all of you here. And we are really excited to build and grow this robust network of partners in the Caribbean region. We thank you for joining us on a virtual platform, and we really are looking forward to connecting together over the next 3 days. As Yaritza mentioned, my name is Eliza Thomas. I am the Executive Secretariat for NOAA in the Caribbean, and I'm also the 2025 Canals Fellow in NOAA's Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs. My colleagues Alyssa Zabrowski and Zoraida Perez Delgado and I had the absolute joy of diving into some of the archives of NOAA in the Caribbean. And we're excited to share a brief overview of how NOAA in the Caribbean got started and what some of the early days looked like. After this presentation, we will have the pleasure of hearing a conversation between three of the people who played very pivotal roles in the formation of this group. But we wanted to start by digging through the depths a little bit and sharing some of that with you. So to start, NOAA in the Caribbean has been around since about 2010, but the groundwork for it was actually laid way back in 2002, when the NOAA administrator at the time, Vice Admiral Conrad Lautenbacher, established 5 regional coordination pilot programs. And the goal of these programs was essentially to add value to NOAA's mission through a couple of different avenues. One, building and maintaining regional relationships with stakeholders and partners, better understanding NOAA's regional capabilities, building some awareness of the activities and capabilities of current and prospective partners, and really just, synthesizing the regional needs and capabilities into a list of achievable and nationally significant priorities. So as Catherine mentioned with her overview of CCART and the Regional Collaboration Network as a whole, the network began as an opportunity to strengthen NOAA's connection to place and to also facilitate some cross-region and cross-line office collaboration. And one of the first pilot programs that started in 2002 was the South Atlantic Regional Team, which was the first iteration of CCART. And all 5 pilot programs went really, really well. That in 2006, the Regional Collaboration Network was officially established with 8 designated regional teams to foster improved coordination and integration across NOAA and with its partners. And the 8 regions represented within the network are shown here. And you can see CCART represented in the light blue in the Southeast US and Caribbean. So CCART first started meeting annually as a regional team in about 2007. But by the 2008 meeting, NOAA staff working in the Caribbean joined the annual workshop to offer their perspectives on various needs and priorities that were specific to the Caribbean region. And by the 2010 CCART meeting in Savannah, Georgia, it became clear to the broader group that NOAA's work in the Caribbean really deserved its own focus group. Within the broader umbrella of CCART, they wanted to have a group that was focused exclusively on all the amazing work that was happening in the Caribbean. So as Alyssa and Zoraida and I dug through some of the archives, we found an old agenda of some fiscal year planning from 2011 for some of the top priorities for CCART for the year. And as you can see here, the very first top priority was establishing NOAA in the Caribbean as its own group. So what do we mean by NOAA in the Caribbean? As a subset of CCART, we are within the Southeast and Caribbean region, but specifically, this group focuses on NOAA initiatives and partner projects within the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And this group officially kicked off in 2010 with the first in-person steering committee meeting held in 2011. You can see the group of awesome folks here on the screen. And the meeting included a powerhouse of awesome, wonderful people, some of whom, again, we will be hearing from shortly. And this team really laid the strategic groundwork for the NOAA and the Caribbean group. But they didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So they had a model of of another subgroup within the broader CCART region, NOAA and the Carolinas, that sort of helped to model some of what the Caribbean region wanted to follow suit, but obviously shifting the priority and shifting the sort of focus to the initiatives of the Caribbean. So that was, mainly the focus of NOAA in the Caribbean at the time, and it has continued to be, is to strengthen and expand existing partnerships and provide unified messaging and services to the broader Caribbean region. And to also start to identify some opportunities for international collaboration within the region as well. Over the following years, the community needs throughout the region really became clear. And this informed the group's mission and vision and overall direction as a whole. At one of the first partner meetings for the NOAA and the Caribbean group, the group came up with a list of desired outcomes. And this was going to guide the group moving forward. And I think one of the things that has become so apparent in the process of talking with a bunch of folks and digging through these old documents is that, while time has passed, the needs of the community have really remained the same. And at the end of the day, most of these needs and priorities come back to relationship building. They come back to relationship building, to regional information sharing, to engaging with stakeholders across communities in the Caribbean. And these needs, ended up informing the development of a vision to sort of serve as a North Star, guiding the actions and the specific goals of the group. So as you see on the screen, this vision, is to have a vibrant and healthy Caribbean community that works together to improve our understanding of, maintain, and protect ocean and coastal resources and ecosystems. And in this vision, the Caribbean community adapts to a changing climate and mitigates coastal hazards for the protection of life, property, and the livelihoods of its inhabitants. And this vision has stayed consistent for the last 11 plus years. And after looking through many old agendas and meeting notes from the last decade, one priority has really continued to stand out, and that is that the longevity and the effectiveness of the group's work in this region really comes down to relationships. So, at the heart of what this group has been doing for the last 15 years at this point is building these local and regional relationships to facilitate that collaboration, to build these partnerships, to share ideas and information, products, services that NOAA can offer. It's also building relationships to share cultural insight and to share knowledge of place. And by providing a platform that connects NOAA and its core partners and key users in the region, the NOAA and the Caribbean Group has been able to address distinct regional challenges that are related to NOAA's mission, but using that one NOAA approach. And you'll hear about many of those ongoing projects over the next couple of days. So it'll be exciting to put that framework into practice. Since 2012, the NOAA and the Caribbean Group has been consistent in its outreach and efforts to strengthen the broader community of partners who are working in the Caribbean region. So we've got 671 community group members, 60 of which of you are on the call today. We're so glad you're here. We also deliver quarterly newsletters with project updates and funding opportunities. And we hold a quarterly community group meeting to continue to facilitate those opportunities for connection building and networking. We also hold our annual multi-day partners meeting to provide some space for future visioning and information sharing as well, including developing best practices and coalition building. So we are so glad you are here for that meeting. I believe it is our 10th year, and we're thrilled that you're here. So in 2025, we have been taking the opportunity to ensure that our information is up to date so that we can continue to provide useful and effective services to the broader Caribbean community. And we're also in a period of visioning for the future and looking to what's next. And so that's when meetings like this become so relevant. And we're really looking forward to continuing to work with all of you and have some fruitful discussions over the next few days about what some relevant and priority needs and opportunities are throughout the region. But to help frame the future of those future-focused discussions, we would like to hear from the perspectives of some of the folks who started this work 15 years ago. And with that, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to our panel. And my colleague, Alyssa Zabrowski, is a member of the NOAA and the Caribbean Executive Team, as well as a member of the Planning Committee for this meeting. So she will facilitate the panel discussion and introduce our panelists. We're so grateful to Gino, to Dana, and to Lee for being here. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Alyssa. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Eliza. So like Eliza said, my name is Alyssa Zabrowski. I work with NOAA's Disaster Preparedness Program as the Southeast and Caribbean Regional Preparedness Coordinator. So as someone who works in the region, I've been with NOAA for about a year and a half, so relatively new, but it has been a pleasure working with NOAA in the Caribbean. And I am really excited to get the conversation going with our panelists today. So I'll do a quick read through of our panelists' biographies today, but certainly as we dive deeper, we're going to hear a lot more about their experience with this community. So first up, we have Lisa Marie Karuba, who goes by Lee. So Lee is actually, as Yaritza mentioned at the beginning of the call, has recently retired from NOAA, but Dr. Karuba holds a PhD in ecology from the University of Georgia. She spent most of her federal career with NOAA working for NOAA Fisheries and has participated with this group, NOAA in the Caribbean, since its first inception. She led the Caribbean Field Office for the Southeast Regional Office, first under the Habitat Conservation Division, and then under the Protected Resources Division before moving to Office of Protected Resources headquarters as a senior biologist and then a program manager for the Endangered Species Act Interagency Cooperation Division before, unfortunately, we did lose her to retirement at the end of this April, so very recent. Gino Omi, who is also retired from NOAA for about a year now, a year and a half-ish. I think our paths did not cross, so it's been about a year and a half since Gino stepped down. But before that, he was with NOAA for about 27 years, with the last 14 of those being the coordinator for NOAA's Southeast and Caribbean regional team, so actually Catherine's predecessor. Prior to coming to NOAA, Gino worked for Virginia Sea Grant Consortium, the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, otherwise known as VIMS, and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Gino holds his Bachelor of Science in Biology, a Master's in Marine Biology, and a PhD in Marine Science. And then last but certainly not least, we have Dana Wusnik Mendez. She is still working with NOAA. We still have you on board. And she is the Atlantic and Caribbean Regional Lead for NOAA's Coral Reef Conservation Program. So a little bit about Dana. She's been working with NOAA for about 20 years, a little over 20 years, to support the efforts in coral reef resource managers in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands to ultimately build capacity for effective management of marine protected resources in the wider Caribbean region. She earned her master's in coastal environmental management at Duke University's Nicholas School of the Environment and a bachelor's of science at the University of Richmond. She grew up in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and is now located in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, with her husband Emilio and son Mateo. So with that, thank you all again, all three of you guys, for joining us this morning, or I'm sorry, this afternoon, for this discussion. We're hoping to have a great conversation to kind of kick off this NOAA and the Caribbean annual meeting. So I know I just read your biographies and I don't have any screens to share, so I am happy to have all your beautiful faces on my computer. And I am curious if you could tell us a little bit more about your roles at NOAA. Because I know I kind of touched on a few things in those biographies, but I'm curious what you guys did that stood out to you in your careers with NOAA, because as we saw, we have a lot of years of experience here on this panel. So let's start with Dana. You want to speak to that first? Tell us a little bit more about your role and what you do day to day.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the Atlantic and Caribbean Regional Lead for NOAA's Coral Reef Conservation Program. I also serve as our management liaison with the state of Florida. And I guess my role has always been regional in nature. I started with the Office of Ocean and Coastal Resource Management back in the Coastal Programs Division back in 2002 as a contractor to funded and supported by the newly established Coral Reef Conservation Program, to provide support and funding from the NOAA Coral Program to the U.S. states and territories in the Atlantic Caribbean region that have coral resources. So that's Florida, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. And so I've worked with those programs in some capacity at some level since 2002. And as our program grew over the years and we expanded, that role came from being the liaison for all of those places to being a regional lead when we were able to put positions on the ground in the U.S. Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico. Over the years, I guess another highlight that's relevant to this discussion is an initiative across the wider Caribbean region to work with marine protected area managers and build capacity for the effective management of coral reef MPAs through a partnership initiative that I developed with the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute called MPA Connect. And so we work across 40 different MPAs in 15 different Caribbean jurisdictions, including the U.S. jurisdictions. So I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate that. Lee, do you want to speak a little bit more to your role with NOAA and how that kind of intersected with this community?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. So yeah, I was in Puerto Rico already as an environmental consultant, and I started working for NOAA Fisheries when they decided to, from the Southeast Regional Office, actually have someone based in the Caribbean to work under the Habitat Conservation Division. So doing essential fish habitat work, working with the Caribbean Fishery Management Council, and also working with Dana actually in the Coral Reef Conservation Program. So Dana and I have known each other a long time. And one of the first things actually was that we realized that we didn't have materials in Spanish, which was a bit horrifying considering that at the time there wasn't all the internet, kids these days, internet, cell phones. We didn't have all that stuff. So people were not so well versed in English and in Puerto Rico because Spanish remains the official language there. So one of the first efforts that we did with funds from the Coral Reef Conservation Program, actually, and also working with some folks in NOS, for instance, and Habitat Conservation in headquarters, was to start putting forward bilingual materials and really trying to be more accessible, I guess, to our audiences in not just Puerto Rico, but a lot of St. Croix has a lot of Spanish-speaking folks as well. So just trying to make sure that we were more accessible to our stakeholders. And then in 2006, I switched over to protected resources and began working on things like the issue of listing corals because of stressors like climate change and anthropogenic threats. So, and then even when I transitioned to headquarters, I continued some of the work in the Caribbean, which is why I've continued supporting this initiative until my retirement because I had started working a lot on the climate issues. And as I transitioned to headquarters, I continued working with the the national climate assessments. And in fact, the last one that came out, I was the federal coordinating lead for the Caribbean chapter because we finally, with the fourth version of the assessment, managed to get a chapter only for the Caribbean, recognizing that we are not the same as the Southeast. So that was something that I continued as I transitioned into headquarters and working more at the national level and not just Caribbean.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Gino, do you want to speak a little bit about your role?
Sure, thanks, Liz. I got lured back down from Virginia, which is where I grew up as a youngster, in 1995 to work for SCDNR on a project that was funded by the NOAA Coastal Services Center, which had just been started a couple of years before that, now known as the Office for Coastal Management. Did various roles with there, working on environmental characterizations and ocean observing systems and a couple of other things before starting in 2009 as the regional coordinator for the Southeastern Caribbean region. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful position. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that Catherine is thriving in that role now as well, because it's a great opportunity to look across an agency and try to figure out how to make the parts work together better. And it's always kind of it's not surprising that in a large agency, not everybody talks to each other, right? So, but you get people in the room and you can really get a lot of things to happen. So anyway, I did that for 14 years and really enjoyed it, and really enjoyed getting to meet people across the agency, mostly in the region, but not exclusively. And just finding where there's commonalities across different parts of the agency where we can actually work together better. So that's, as far as my interest in the Caribbean community, that's certainly part of the region, and enjoyed working in that region, enjoyed getting to learn the culture and the people there as well. So 14 years as regional coordinator, retired 2 years ago. Almost to be 2 years into this month, actually. Thanks, Liz.
Absolutely. And we definitely miss yours and Lee's presence here at NOAA in the Caribbean, that's for sure. So it's sounding like we started off with the more of a professional background, but I am curious if you guys have any personal experience with what drew you to the Caribbean that helped, give you your passion in the work that you're doing, over the years, anything in particular. I think, Lee, you mentioned you lived down in Puerto Rico for quite a while, I believe. So is there anything in particular about the Caribbean that gives you kind of that passion? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. And we started with Dana last time. Let's start with Lee this time. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so you mentioned it already. So my husband is Puerto Rican, and I had moved to Puerto Rico quite a long time ago, before in 2017 coming to headquarters to work. But I still consider Puerto Rico home. And in my work in the Caribbean field office, we work Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. So those places are near and dear to my heart. And I'm actually planning, now that I'm retiring, to move back to a place where I like the weather much better, regardless of hurricane season. Um, and I will admit that I still, my husband stayed in Puerto Rico when I came to Silver Spring. So I do still consider Puerto Rico 100% my home. And so, yeah. And obviously, as I mentioned, having been there, from basically about, I guess, 1996 on, just seeing that change in like the reefs, for instance, has been dramatic, depressing. And so being able to do things like work on, listing corals and trying to get them more protection, critical habitat designations. And honestly, since most of my work, and a little different from Dana and Gino, most of my work in both habitat conservation and then protected resources was more about looking at proposed development projects and trying to figure out how appropriate they were, and then how to avoid and minimize impacts from them. I do feel like we really had a lot of impetus there to try and promote change and better practices. And that was a lot of what we did, including with the Coral Reef Conservation Program funding. So yeah, that remains my passion.
That's beautiful. And I'm really happy to hear you might be moving back. That's exciting news. Gina, do you want to speak to maybe your personal experiences in the Caribbean and how that may have intersected with your drive to do this work?
Certainly not the same level of personal experience that Lee has down there. My interest really started with the first CCART meeting that I ran, which was actually in San Juan, and getting to meet people and hearing about the resources, hearing about the culture, that's just a little different and a little bit unique from what we deal with in the mainland southeast. And I saw it as challenges and opportunities, right? So trying to figure out how to tackle that, and as part of the larger region that we were working in, but did have some, I think, unique opportunities that we tried to address, and that's kind of the way I was looking at it, and had certainly a wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of new people down in the islands that I would not have met without through this job, and had a real pleasure working with folks down there.
That sounds very similar to my experience, where I've gotten to get engaged a little more in the Caribbean community because of this job. So that's amazing. What about you, Dana? Can you speak a little bit to what drives you personally about this work?
Sure. I would say personal and professional interests in working in the Caribbean, I guess, started during an intermission in my life, between undergrad and grad school. I had always wanted to do marine conservation and marine biology, but just really wasn't sure where exactly I wanted to channel that and what I wanted to focus on. And so some people take a gap year. I took a gap 5 years between undergrad and grad. And for 3 of those years, ended up working in Mexico, on the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef System. And I worked for two organizations. First, I went down working for an organization known as RARE, the Rare Center for Tropical Conservation. It was a training guide program for fishermen who lived in or around protected areas who wanted to become nature guides. And so I taught them marine ecology and conversational English, and I loved it so much I wanted to stay, and I got a job with a Mexican NGO on the Yucatan Peninsula, and got placed in a fishing village that had petitioned the federal government of Mexico for the establishment of a federal protected area there. So I worked for 3 years to coordinate a community process to establish a coral reef MPA, and that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So after that, I decided to do not a research focus in my graduate career, but a management and policy focus, which is why I chose Duke and their coastal management program. But that's where I fell in love with Caribbean coral reef ecosystems for sure.
That's beautiful. And it's really guided your entire career, it sounds like, just falling in love with that ecosystem down there. So, and I say down there because I'm located in South Carolina. So I am not anywhere near the Caribbean right now, unfortunately. Um, so my next question is a little bit easier, and just for folks' awareness who may be on the line and not as familiar with our current structure of NOAA in the Caribbean. So we do, like Yaritza mentioned at the top, we have an executive team that kind of works to help keep some of these initiatives going in the background and guide kind of where we're going. But I know the structure of that has kind of changed over the years. So I am curious, individually, kind of what your roles were within the NOAA and the Caribbean group over the years, and how that may have changed. I know we've said, you guys have been here since its inception and have helped guide kind of what this group looks like. But how have those roles changed throughout your career? Have you had to step away at any point? Have you maintained? I know, Lee, we've had you on the executive team for a while to provide us some of that guidance, but I'm curious with your roles in the group throughout the years. So, Gino, do you want to start us off with how you kind of worked within the Caribbean group structure?
Sure. Thanks, Alyssa. When I mentioned the first CCART meeting down in San Juan, and that was kind of where I think really the idea kind of bubbled up to pull this group together, and that CCART had a little bit of resources. We could, both in people power and a little bit of money that we could help maybe kick this thing off. We wanted it to be informal, and we initially modeled it after a group called NOAA in the Carolinas, which was just kind of a volunteer, informal gathering of people to share information. The people working at the fisheries lab in Beaufort had no idea what all the people at the Geophysical Data Center in Asheville were doing. And so there was just an opportunity to bring people together and have a better understanding of the broader NOAA, and then look for opportunities for coordination and collaboration. So we kind of started modeling it after that. And that was in the beginning. And as CCART coordinator, I was involved in the leadership team for it from the inception. I think like Dana and Lee have been as well. And it was always a project in the CCART agenda as a way to provide some, these kind of organizations need some sort of dedicated time to help coordinate them and keep things going. Somebody to create the agendas and to do that sort of thing. And we had aspirations at some point of doing something bigger. There was a NOAA Arctic program, Arctic Alaska program, and we saw that as maybe a opportunity for NOAA in the Caribbean. We assembled a inventory, rather lengthy inventory of projects and programs, and put together a strategic plan and tried to sell it to NOAA leadership to get some kind of larger dedicated funding for the effort. Never was successful with that. In fact, I think Dana and Lee may remember we waited months and months and months to get any kind of acknowledgement of what we had put through. But anyway, it was a good start. It was a great opportunity to gather information together and see what was going on, and then be able to share that back with the community. So I'll stop there and let Lee and Dana chip in.
Lee or Dana, do either of y'all want to jump in next? Or I can volunteer one of you.
Sure. Yeah, so, as Gino said, it really all started with that Puerto Rico meeting in 2009. In 2008, CCART had their team meeting in Miami, and I was invited as a guest. I wasn't a CCART team member yet, and invited as a guest with two other folks representing the Caribbean region. Lee, was that you? Was it you two? No. I'm trying to remember who it was. Anyway, a long time ago.
Jocelyn went.
Was it Joss? um, so anyway, the point being, CCART, they wanted to definitely get more of a pulse on what was going on relevant to NOAA's programs and mission in the region, pulled in some guests, and after that meeting invited some of us to actually join as team members. So after that meeting, I joined as a team member, and the first team meeting I participated in as a member was that San Juan, Puerto Rico meeting. And as Gino said, we looked at that model in NOAA in the Carolinas. I think, Gino, you were referring to kind of that NOAA Caribbean strategy, which was a distinct but simultaneous effort going on within NOAA. There had been increased NOAA engagement in the Caribbean region at the leadership level and interest in developing and implementing a pointed strategy at how NOAA could provide increased support in the region. And we wanted to keep a pulse on that. But really, the NOAA in the Caribbean initiative was mostly about connecting. And I really like how you worded it in one of your previous responses about your role in CCART and that opportunity of working across an agency and making parts work together better. And I think that's a big part of what we were trying to do with NOAA in the Caribbean. There were many different parts of NOAA that were working in the region. And we all didn't have a good grasp on, those of us who were working in the region didn't always have a good grasp on these programs spread across, the different line offices and offices within those line offices. Many of the people working on initiatives in the Caribbean weren't based in the Caribbean. And so it was hard to know who was doing what. And you would often find out from your partners, right, who would get a little frustrated that we didn't know what the other parts of our agency were doing in the place that we worked. And so that was a big part of the driver, just wanting a better informed NOAA of what we were trying to accomplish in the Caribbean, who our partners were, what they needed, how those needs overlapped and crossed between different NOAA offices and programs. So we got that little bit of seed money in 2009 from the CCART budget, and had a scoping meeting in Miami in 2010 with an initial group to just brainstorm how should we do this. And then in 2011 had our very first steering committee meeting also in Miami. And then we're able to have our very first annual partners meeting in May of 2012, where it all really started to come together. So I can't even remember what your initial question was.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. It was the timeline of your involvement with NOAA, and it sounds, no, in the Caribbean, I'm sorry, but it sounds like it has changed, throughout the years, as we're recognizing, initially, like you said, those missed connections, even internally within NOAA, right. and the value of kind of recognizing that, and then putting in all of this effort that you all did to get some seed money and actually get something like this going, this community. Lee, did you want to add anything to that question about your role?
I mean, I think that Dana and Gino captured it really well. I guess the only thing that I would say, because Dana hasn't wanted to fess up yet, is that she was the first chair and I was the first vice chair. And yeah, and and also we both worked, and Gino as well, with with the support of CCART. We both worked really hard to get the first in-person partners meeting done in St. Thomas. That was actually pretty monumental to get that done, and to bring people together. And then from there on, like they both mentioned, trying to figure out who does what, because our partners were, as Data Express, getting a little frustrated. Not just that we didn't always know what other NOAA folks were doing, because everybody would be like, but you're NOAA. But also to make sure that our partners were not getting called on for things multiple times, but instead we were this conduit to say, hey, there are these 5 things going on, and rather than have 5 different groups ask you, let's just send this one question with maybe 5 parts to it, because it was, Caribbean is small, the U.S. Caribbean, and you end up working with the same folks. And so it's a little frustrating when people's time and money is limited for them to just continue getting pinged and pinged and pinged, right? So, and also we did make an effort early on, NOAA in the Caribbean used to be very small in terms of the NOAA folks. We had this steering committee, and I think we had set a cap of about 20, but we tried to make sure as many different programs as possible were represented. So we had, folks from nautical charts, folks from coral program, folks from other ocean service aspect, just trying to get who really represent those core things that go on in the Caribbean, so that we could begin to improve communications both internally and externally. I think that was really the biggest thing for us, because before it was this hodgepodge and basically a hot mess, honestly, where we ourselves didn't even realize. When we started pulling together those inventories of employees who did things in the Caribbean and then projects in the Caribbean, I mean, we were shocked to see all the stuff that was going on. So I think that was one of the really true important aspects early on to decide to move forward first by kind of inventorying.
I love that. Yeah.
And Alyssa,
And
if I could just add one thing,
yeah,
when we had that meeting in 2009 in San Juan, I was surprised, being fairly new to NOAA actually, but certainly new to regional collaboration and working in the islands. I was surprised how many people were meeting each other for the first time at this meeting, and how many people thanked me for bringing them together, giving them that opportunity to learn from each other. And you think Ireland's fairly small, right? All the NOAA people are going to know each other. It's not the case, and so it really, it showed what an opportunity we had to try to improve that level of communication across NOAA and partners at the time.
yeah, and we us and that are newer in NOAA are, of course, very appreciative of all of this hard work that you guys put in to get this community established and provide some sort of guidance for us, that we hope we can continue to uphold, and make you guys proud for sure. But it sounds like, you put in all of this effort to get things going and to kind of understand what NOAA's role was in the Caribbean, kind of the projects we were working on. And we talked in the beginning, it's been about, several years, 20-ish years since we've had this community group going. I'm curious from y'all's perspective, if you have any specific examples or even broad examples of the change that you've witnessed as this community has grown. And that can be, I'm thinking, either internal to NOAA or even with the communities that we serve in the Caribbean. So I don't want to put anyone on the spotlight for thinking of specific examples, but maybe Lee, we could start with you first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, because I was working in other things like the Coral Program and NOAA in the Caribbean, and we all had a lot of overlap. And then when we did have the landscape conservation cooperatives, that we had them as cooperators as well. But I will say one thing is that because of the increased communication and actually getting folks in the States, because it's very different being in the 40 US states versus 48 US states. Sorry, I can't even do geography right now. See, that's what happens when you retire. Versus the Caribbean, it is that, people don't understand the resource limitations in people, in money, in, so many things. We're very spoiled in the contiguous US. And so I think one of the big things, and again, this is not just specific to NOAA in the Caribbean, but I think conversations like the ones that we have in NOAA in the Caribbean are what made this happen. We started to realize in programs like the Coral program, for instance, matching funds, totally unrealistic. And so we ended up getting kind of exceptions to the rule, I guess, where we could have in-kind match. We could take advantage of the fact that fishers have boats and, university have boats, and we could call those things in for matching, because it used to be that I want to say pretty much every single, and this isn't specific only to NOAA, but collaboration with other federal partners, we got them to do this too. And I really do think that NOAA was the impetus here. We got a lot of grant programs to say, okay, we'll take in-kind match. We won't just make you do this one-to-one funding match, because for the Caribbean, honestly, it was very unrealistic, and it made a lot of grant programs totally inaccessible. And I know when I first started in 2001, that was so true. Like it was the most common thing you would hear from people. Well, yeah, that looks great, and thanks for sharing that opportunity with me, but I'm never going to be able to apply. And I do think that the longer we establish these things like NOAA in the Caribbean and talking to each other, and then we made more efforts of, doing workshops about proposal writing, but also, like I say, really insisting with the agencies that they listen to the needs and recognize that, because I don't know about others, but I did get tired about hearing, oh, we never get proposals. Well, of course you don't, because they will never have the money to make that match. So I think things like that, I think talking and better understanding needs of our community made some important investments like that move forward. And again, I'm not saying that's necessarily only NOAA in the Caribbean, but I do think that NOAA in the Caribbean and our ability to join up and really hear partners did help with that. So
I appreciate that. And I do recall at the top of this conversation, you even mentioned some translated resources as something that was an outcome that surprisingly was not a thing, so I did want to recognize that even those kinds of examples are great. Gino, anything in particular stand out to you?
No real specific examples, but I think the overall increased awareness of who's doing what makes. During a CCAR meeting one time, somebody said that it helps me do my day job better, and by knowing what other people are doing, that they are not only more informed generally, but they can apply that knowledge to the work that they do. And I think that has been really helpful in our NOAA staff and colleagues and partners in the Caribbean having that greater awareness of who's doing what. One specific example, and I don't know how well it's been maintained, but we had got a call from the coastal program manager who had gotten a call from his governor that there was a big white NOAA ship out there, and what are they doing out there? And so just little information can do a lot to help. And so we were trying to set it up so that every time NOAA Corps was getting ready to move down that area, we would get a notification. We could let somebody down there know, and so that there wasn't a surprise to anybody to see a big white NOAA ship outside their window. So little things like that I think have a lot of impact. Not maybe all that tangible sometimes, but can be really useful.
Amazing. Dana, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the thing that has impressed me most, that has changed the most in this initiative, is the growth of it. The statistic you provided in the beginning, or Eliza provided in her presentation, of the community group members, was it almost 600 people? What was it? It was astounding. And I looked back to the report from that first partners workshop in 2012 that seemed so, all engaging at the time. And we had 74 participants. 13 of those were NOAA folks, and the rest were partners. And just to see the growth, and I actually I had my son in 2012, and I took a hiatus um, after I came back to NOAA from maternity leave, but took a hiatus from CCART and from NOAA in the Caribbean. And somehow it came to be 5 years again. I guess I take 5 years in life to figure things out. I don't know. But and I rejoined CCART in 2017. And I remember then thinking, wow, how much NOAA in the Caribbean had evolved and grown, and just the level of engagement. But at the same time, I look across the participant list of the folks that are here today, and there are people here today who were at that first partners meeting in 2012. And so what's also very impressive is the continued involvement and engagement of folks who have been involved in this initiative since day one, which I'd like to interpret as a sign that it's a worthwhile use of people's time, and that it's been productive and successful at making those connections, at elevating those needs and priorities and initiatives going on in the region. So that's just really encouraging to see too.
That's amazing. And the retention rate of folks that have been here just as long as the group has been, present is amazing. And Zoraida clarified for us 671 community group members, which is might as well round up to 700. That's awesome. That's a huge
mind blown.
community. Yeah.
It's amazing.
And so we've talked a lot about, some of the good aspects of this community group, but I am curious too, what have you guys seen as maybe some of the bigger challenges that you've had to deal with over the years, whether it be something internal in NOAA that has provided barriers to, doing all of this amazing work, or Danny, you mentioned taking 5 years off, to raise your son. I love it. I'm all for it. But I'm curious, so what are some of those challenges that maybe we could, as we're moving forward with this group, that we could learn from? And Gino, I'll start with you this time.
I hate to say money, because that's always seems to be what everybody puts forward as the challenge. But, we were hoping to be able to fund collaborative projects, in the Caribbean, to really spur on, let's get Fish and Weather Service together and work on this. Let's get NOS and Fish together and work on that, and have enough money to be able to actually kind of spur that collaboration on. I mean, everybody's busy. Everybody has their own mission to work on. Getting those collaborations sometimes just seems a little extra, and takes a little bit of extra, maybe money, definitely time to make it happen. And so that to me has been the challenge. These kind of volunteer organizations require time and nurturing, right? And you got to have, it takes somebody's staff time to do that. And that's been sometimes a little hard to find, to make that go forward. And so anyway, that I would say is the challenge. There's some language challenges. There's somewhat cultural challenges in a way, although as I said earlier, I found those as opportunities, where we can try to help improve things. So I'll stop there.
I really like your framing of challenges as opportunities for growth. And so I appreciate that kind of thought process. Dana, what about you? What are some things you found the most challenging?
Yeah, I would agree with Gino. It's, I guess I would roll it up as NOAA capacity to work in the region. And that's funding is definitely a key element of that, and having the resources to implement collaborative projects. And CCART's budget has been $50K since the inception of regional collaboration, right? So it's always a little bit of seed money, and it's really amazing how that funding is leveraged and how much gets accomplished with these regional collaboration budgets. But it's also about human resource capacity. And, I think Lee referred to the fact that a lot a lot of the NOAA effort, in the Caribbean region isn't based in the Caribbean region. And there's, while it has grown significantly, there's still a limited presence of NOAA programs and employees physically based in both Caribbean jurisdictions, and even more limited in the U.S. Virgin Islands than in Puerto Rico. And I think that really has been a challenge, of especially when it comes to engaging with the partners on the ground, which is just why having this annual partners meeting and having the newsletter to communicate and get information out is critical to achieving the goals that NOAA and the Caribbean set out to accomplish. So I would say capacity has probably been the biggest challenge.
Appreciate that answer for sure. Leah, what about you? What do you see?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything really different from that. I would just maybe build on it a little bit, because one of the things with having the lack of people actually sitting in the jurisdiction means that, like, the cultural differences, it does require education. I mean, when I first started in our Caribbean field office, I ended up, taking on, a purchase card and convenience checks and various things. And in part, it was because a woman who was in our office who did a lot of the budget management purchase type stuff was from New York, and she was very, harsh. And when she was trying to deal with folks in the Caribbean who want to start off with, like, how are you? Good morning, good afternoon. No, there was none of that. It was just like, this is what I need. And people actually started saying to me, I don't want to work with her. I'm not going to support you guys if that's the person I have to talk to. So I do feel like not being sit in the islands, if you're not from the islands, you don't have that same kind of, depending on where you're from, you maybe don't have that same sort of mindset. You might be very rush, and I think that is something that knowing the Caribbean certainly has helped with the collaborations. I think also just, like Gino said, it's an opportunity to learn about those cultural differences. But it also means that folks who, when we do have positions, sometimes retention is an issue, because it is an adjustment if you're not used to island living. It is, like I said, we're a bit spoiled in the States, when we're in the 48 contiguous, because we are used to, services and things, and the more instant gratification of our now virtual based world and whatnot. It's not like that. Still sometimes, I mean, at home we went 100% solar, so since 2017 hurricanes, we're good. But not everybody has that, and still internet can be spotty. Your electricity might be spotty still. It's just not the same. So I think that's been something that that is definitely a challenge. Not just not having the capacity in the islands, but also being able to retain capacity in the islands, especially if people are moving there and are not from there, and maybe are not as accustomed to some of the challenges that you need to deal with. But I would also say another thing has been, and I think it was touched on already, a lot of us, when we started, it was volunteer. And so you're trying to manage really moving this initiative forward and growing it and everything without it necessarily being a commitment that your bosses bought into. And as we started growing and having more executive team meetings, or what was originally just our steering committee, we started recognizing that we needed it to be like in our performance plans, for instance, if we were NOAA employees, so that we actually had our bosses buy-in and commitment, so that we could keep moving it forward. Because it can't just be just voluntary. There has to be some level of acknowledgement that it is part of your job, and it's important. And so I think a lot of the internal communication was something that we really tried to do, and try to really promote the importance. And CCART was really fundamental in a lot of that too, I would say. I would also say, in-person meetings have been a significant challenge. We had our hurricanes, we had funding, we had government shutdowns, and while these virtual meetings are amazing, I think Gino touched on it earlier on. There's nothing like being able to actually sit down and meet and interact and maybe even have lunch and jokes with a person who you've only communicated with via email or something. It's just, there's no substitute sometimes. Especially in areas where, like I say, sometimes there are challenges with communication. So, yeah, I think that was a challenge. We did also work towards often having translation services, but that's not always easy either to make that work appropriately and therefore be more accessible to some of our audience. So that's definitely another challenge. But yeah, I'll stop there.
No, I appreciate that. And to the point of virtual, it is as great as it has been, over the last few years, especially post COVID, to have these opportunities for engagement. Relationships are built at the speed of trust, and trust is a little tough to build virtually sometimes. So I do think we, at least on the executive team, recognize the value of those in-person physical connections for sure. So we're coming up on the end of the questions I had, and I did want to make sure for the audience, if you guys have questions for these amazing panelists, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can make sure to circle up and ask those before we end today. But I did have kind of a bigger question that I wanted to start to wrap us up on, and in that, I know Gino and Lee, you guys have retired, but obviously very passionate about this work. And you guys have been, your entire careers, right? And Dana, of course, your passion is obvious too. So I'm curious, what would you say you envision or hope for the future of this community group? And NOAA and the Caribbean in general, just our work in the Caribbean. And I'm very curious of what you guys may see, especially with all of your experience. And so I know that's a bigger question, but Gino, I will start with you. Oh, did he sign off? Oh, there he is.
There you go.
Hit the video button instead of the microphone. I'm a little rusty after 2 years being retired. I would just love to see it maintained. I think there's opportunity for, maybe getting resources in, but I think if nothing else, if the level of communication can keep going, the newsletters, the annual meetings, if we can just maintain that, again, I think it provides so much for the community. I had a colleague who once said that you keep increasing your communication until you start coordinating, and you keep coordinating until you start collaborating. And so it's really, communication is where you start, and understanding what each other does and where those opportunities lie for coordinating, for collaborating. I'd love, be nice to polish off that strategic plan at some point, but that was a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and maybe it could be reduced in scope a little bit so it's not quite as much work. But you need the right environment at NOAA, I think, to put that forward too. Maybe now's not the time for that, but I think that alone is really important, and finding those key. I mentioned about the ships. I think it's a fairly simple win, to do that, and finding those little opportunities where just getting information flowing at the right time and place can be really, really important.
I love that. Dana, do you want to go next? What do you envision for us moving forward?
Well, I hope that NOAA in the Caribbean and NOAA in the Caribbean have a future of continuing to provide the partnership support and services that we have and that have grown over the years. You know, we've recently lost some of our key players, partners, and teammates working in the region. And so I hope we can, you know, sustain the critical support we provide in protecting property and life and helping coastal communities be more resilient, both the human social communities as well as the ecological communities, and that we can continue to support management and conservation of coastal and marine resources and ecosystems. And I hope that NOAA in the Caribbean continues to serve as a connector of all of those things, connecting all of the programs within NOAA that are continuing to do that work and connecting us with our partners. So yeah, I think, you know, just hoping NOAA in the Caribbean can keep doing providing the great service it's been providing at serving as a connector.
Amazing. And I myself personally have found a lot of value in those connections as well that NOAA in the Caribbean has helped facilitate. So I definitely agree with that. And Lee, what would you say you envision for this community moving forward?
Well, I would say I'm really encouraged by how many folks in NOAA now who are, you know, from the Caribbean are engaged, like Yaritza and Arkansas, Zoraida. I really think that that's very important to not just be the people who are from NOAA and work in the Caribbean, but people who are actually, you know, from there, and can speak a lot more to opportunities, challenges, ways to overcome them, etc. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that we have a lot of younger NOAA folks engaging more and more. I think that's really amazing because when we first started off, we were a lot of us, you know, had already been in NOAA for a while, working in the Caribbean. I mean, some of us did start, obviously, like I said, I started in NOAA in 2001. So obviously I was younger at one point. But as we aged up, I feel like, you know, we started needing to bring in a lot of younger folks, and I'm glad to see that that's been happening. So I would say to continue that. But as Dana mentioned, you know, we do also have folks who have a lot of historic knowledge. So I would also say, you know, we, at least myself, for instance, you know, definitely invested and perfectly willing to continue assisting and informing as needed. But because I do think that historical knowledge is often important, but I also think that the younger folks are the wave of the future, moving it forward and definitely continuing to take advantage of and be creative about how to take advantage of partnerships, especially given the way things seem to be evolving right now.
I love that. And that's something I've noticed as well. We do get a lot of students on the line, and that's kind of what we were hoping with this virtual opportunity, is to engage some of the either early career professionals or mid-career that are maybe switching from a different sector to this resilient space, this climate space. So I definitely appreciate that thought. And with that last question and beautiful sentiments from you guys, I want to again thank all three of you for joining us for this conversation today. I think it was an amazing way to kind of look back at where we've all started with NOAA in the Caribbean, where you guys worked really hard to get this initiative going. And again, seeing almost 700 people engaged to this day, I think is really beautiful. I see that Catherine has put in our CCART and NOAA in the Caribbean contact email. So if folks do have questions, either for panelists or about anything we kind of discussed here today, feel free to send that email, send your question to that email. And she put it in the chat again, right there, region.sccarib@noaa.gov. And so I'll just give a round of virtual applause. Thank you all again so much for being here. I really appreciated this conversation, and it was great to get to see your all's faces, even if it was just in 2D. And with that, that will wrap up our panel portion of this first session. And like Yaritza said at the beginning, we will have our Intro to Speed Networking session, which was required for registration. So if you registered, you should have gotten a calendar invite for that. And we will take about, let's see, it's 2:15 now. We will take about a 15-minute break. And we will see you guys over at the speed networking sessions, which again, you will use that link that you were emailed previously once you did register. And it looks like Yaritza, please use that email in the form to be added. Okay, and Yaritza added the form to join our listserv for NOAA in the Caribbean for folks that may have received this invite without being on the listserv. As you can tell from our panel today, it is a very helpful, community-driven place to be. So again, thank you all for being here, and that will end the first session for NOAA in the Caribbean. If you will not be joining us for speed networking, we will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. to kick us off for the second day of our annual meeting. So thank you so much, guys, and have a great rest of your day, Gino, Dana, and Lee.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Alyssa.
it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Alyssa.
Alyssa.
Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity. Bye.